we'll actually start a bit earlier because there's good chit-chat happening around the room at the moment. Great discussion at our table talking about the chat IA stuff at the moment, about what that means to the world of wordsmithing or people doing essays or learning at school or whatever. So that artificial intelligence side of things, which we hardly know anything about. Well, I don't, that's for sure. I'll claim, that's my claim to fame. But at the end of the day, it's very important that we understand out there in the world of technology that there are all sorts of ways in which they capture data and information. And in the discussion at our table with our guest speakers, it's fairly well entrenched in the world about how hackers or people out there who are committing these crimes, and I call them crimes, are collecting data. One area that I feel we need to be aware of is that when you're hacked, your information, it's being violated. So, birth certificates, driver's licenses, details about Medicare, all that sort of information. And we're seeing that at the moment where the state government is offering reissues of driver's licenses. And that obviously happened in the Medibank and Optus scams. And we're seeing that now with Latitude. And we are seeing and hearing of more incidences every day about people's data being trapped and yourselves being compromised. So we're living in a very new world. It's a very concerning world, actually, when it comes to this whole issue of cyber security. The other thing is about the insurance. I know when we were working on this workshop, it was about trying to attract insurance companies to this particular event, and hopefully they will come to our next event, which will be in, when's that, Rachel? In June? Yeah, June. Is that right, Julie? 6th of June? Yeah, Hotel Crown. So there'll be a follow-up session to this particular session where it's a bit more of a networking opportunity to talk about these particular issues. And we'd invite all of you to come along, but certainly for you to network with your communities that you sit in at the moment. So please, we welcome you. The other bit that I heard the other day was that we are quite comfortable with throwing away our devices, eradicating all the information, making sure we delete it and throw away our old computers, replace it with new laptops, etc., other devices. And I heard the other day there actually are scrupulous people out there going to these sites where these particular devices are held and grabbing those devices and then taking that information, and there we go, they start the scams. And some of these people, they don't have to be totally, and I'm not being rude here, totally intelligent. They're able to do it. And we think we've cleared it all when, in actual fact, we probably haven't. So that's just another area, about e-waste and what's going to happen in the future. And just on that, just as an advert, we've got a circular economy event coming up on the 3rd of May. And that's a very important part of the circular economy, about how do we recycle, reuse our resources, even when it comes to this area as well. Okay, without any further ado, so we're running a bit early, and Julie Irwin is our timekeeper. So she's pretty strict on that. And so Rachel and Nick and Nigel, please be wary of Julie. But look, I think there's going to be a lot of discussion. I'm looking forward to it. And yeah, Julie's got her eyes on us. So we'll try and be as strict as we can with time. In fact, I think we'll finish early, but with the questions that and the discussions I'm hearing, who knows what might happen. I'd like to now introduce to you Rachel Leonow from NbN Co. Rachel has, with over 15 years experience owning and operating Harvey Norman franchises across Australia. She is passionate about combining her small business knowledge to provide connectivity, support to business across 45 regions throughout South Australia and the Northern Territory in order to deliver NbN's #1 priority, uplifting the digital capability of Australians. Rachel's role is the regional business lead for SA and NT, and we were having a discussion this morning about a blackout that we've got here in Victor Harbour, where basically all of Victor Harbour will be blacked out from Sunday night at 10 o'clock till 6 o'clock on Monday morning. Now, according to SA Power Networks, it may not take those full 8 hours. However, it's a big job they've got to do in replacing a transformer. Murphy's Law, something might go wrong. So if that does happen, if it's the 8 hours, the concern here is about mobile towers, whether they got to be charged up through electricity. The NbN fibre network that we have here in Victor Harbour will be compromised. So you may not be able to use the NbN. Is that right, Rachel? And obviously you can talk about that. So it's a very interesting and quite topical issue as we speak right now. But without any further ado, I'd like to welcome Rachel.
Hopefully everybody can hear me. So Colin mentioned that I used to run some Harvey Norman franchises, and I've been with NbN for about 2 years now. And I remember a couple of years ago, during my tenure there at the City Cross store in Adelaide, I started watching this documentary series called The Last Dance. Is anyone familiar with that particular? Am I not loud enough? How's that? Is that better? Is anyone familiar with that particular docuseries? It's about Michael Jordan. If you haven't watched it, I implore you to watch it. So Michael Jordan, as we know in his career, if you're familiar, he played 15 seasons. He's the GOAT. He's probably the greatest of all times where basketballers are concerned. He earned several valuable player awards. He won 5 championships. And his dedication and work ethic and personal acumen led to an incredible sports career, but made him the legend that he is today. So I kind of became obsessed with Michael Jordan during this time, and I wanted to understand how his brain worked. And so I did a lot of research. I went online and I started Googling, talking about everything, all the answers at our fingertips before, Googling the life and basically the way that Michael Jordan lived his life. And one of his particular mantras was, obstacles don't have to stop you. If you run into a wall, don't turn around and give up. Figure out how to climb it, how to go through it, or how to work around it. Kind of sounds a bit like that going on a bear hunt story. I don't know if anyone's ever read that to their kids. So his career gives us a real lesson in resilience and adaptation. And his motto was always to turn a negative situation into a positive situation. And it's the ability to readily access the change and adjust yourself to versatile conditions. And you need to adapt to different situations and evolve your skills over time. And maybe over the last 2 or 3 years, we've all had to be a little bit like Mike. I've got my clicker here. There we go. So I thought I'd take you through a few little business insights here. Really interestingly, over those last 2 or 3 years, 9 out of 10 businesses have adopted new technologies into their business. Not always by choice, but to keep the business in survival mode, or perhaps in some lucky cases in growth mode. But in order to be resilient, you really didn't have a choice. There's some really obvious ones up there. You know, we know we had a massive increase in the way that we're using video conferencing now. Hence, great example today, live streaming across to our counterparts in Kangaroo Island. We saw a massive increase in our social media uptake. We saw a 22% increase in web presence. So a lot more businesses were realising that they have to service their customers in different ways. We saw a 10% increase in e-commerce, although I challenge that number because I think about my personal e-commerce use was a lot higher than 10% in the last 2 or 3 years. And we saw a massive increase in file sharing as well, about 28% in file sharing. So from a business perspective, we were in a position where we had to create a platform where we could start sharing the information between our employees and also our staff members, as opposed to always delivering that face-to-face or in traditional methods. So then we have a bit of a look at the challenges that businesses have faced over the last couple of years. So sort of post-pandemic, many of you probably relate to a lot of these examples in the room here, maybe 1 or 2, maybe all of them. I think the most common one when I'm out talking to the regions is the massive labour skills shortage at the moment. It's a huge issue, and I know it gets workshopped all of the time at many different events I've been to. I don't know what the solution is yet, but hopefully the government will be able to provide something to us soon. We've had to understand a different virtualised business model now. Customers' expectations have changed, their behaviours have changed, and we need to make sure that we're adapting to that change. We've faced unstable supply chains now. There's not a business that I don't talk to that don't experience some sort of supply issue throughout the pandemic and had to rethink their local versus offshore manufacturing and sourcing. And sometimes we've even had to align ourselves with countries that we have alliances with in order to make those decisions around our supply chain. And of course, we come to today's subject at hand, the challenges we faced against cybersecurity. So Colin was mentioning before, just this week, we've had another cyber breach with Latitude Financial Services. We've got up to 8 million driver's licenses have been breached and stolen. So now it's more prevalent than ever that we have a really robust cyber and security plan implemented into your business. So some of the reasons why businesses use technology to address these changes, it might be to enable that customer experience, improve agility and productivity or efficiency. Maybe you need to allow your team, if not already, to work from anywhere, whether that's home or remotely, if that's feasible for your particular business. And maybe you need to expand and identify new markets outside of your region or possibly your state or maybe even outside of your country. And have you made those appropriate changes to implement and invest in your cybersecurity plan to align with those new technologies that you've had to implement? But then you want to ask yourself, why do I actually want to address all of these issues? What's the personal impact if you don't address these issues? You want to ask yourself if you've created a resilient workplace. Have I got a standard operating environment? Is this the best I can get? And what are the other alternatives if I don't know the answers to all of these questions? Who is out there and who can I turn to get advice and guidance? So TESLite conducted a workplace study in December 2020. If you're really into facts and figures and you want to delve into this kind of stuff, we do have this study on our NbN Co website. But a couple of points to make here is that 76% of small to medium businesses have already made some kind of investment in upgrading their technologies, and now 2 in 3 are actually adopting some kind of new technology strategy into their business. And no surprises here though, over 4 in 5 businesses have had their digital transformation fast-tracked due to the pandemic. I'm sure all of you have experienced this. But interestingly, less than half of the businesses have an actual digital strategy in place. So basically, they're kind of winging it or they're being reactive. And as you know, when you're operating your own business, you want to be in a state where you're being proactive at all times. So if you've already or still in the process of implementing these strategies into your business, the absolute non-negotiable has to be that you have some kind of cybersecurity plan that aligns with the uptake of these strategies. So 3/4 of businesses invested in connectivity due to the pandemic. And once again, there might be some things up here that you personally identify with. Maybe you were required to invest in more data to enable you to evolve your digital transformation, perhaps to enable your team, once again, to work remotely if required. Perhaps you had to purchase more devices and provide connectivity for those devices. And once again, how are you actually securing those devices? All right, Nick, I promise this is the only slide that I've stolen from your pack, but I thought it would be a good opportunity just to plant the seed about something that really stood out for me is when it comes to the facts and figures. But the cost of cybercrime is up to $33 billion in Australia, $33 billion. And the average loss to a small to medium business is anywhere between $39,000 and $88,000. So that's to a personal business. So I think we have to think it's not just the big beasts that cyber criminals are attacking. Anyone is susceptible to cybercrime. But once again, I'm going to leave that up to the experts and let Nick and Nigel cross off and get into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty of the cybercrime. Before I go, I just wanted to provide a quick update about what's actually happening out in the communities with NbN from as far as a connectivity point of view. There's lots of familiar faces in the audience this morning, so I'm sure many of you will already be familiar with our business fibre initiative, but for those who aren't, a couple of years ago we announced our business fibre initiative, and ultimately we wanted to make sure that our counterparts in the regions weren't disadvantaged. Traditionally, our customers in the metropolitan areas, they get access to the best grade fibre, the best grade connectivity. We wanted to make sure that we were levelling that playing field for our regional counterparts. So the Business Fibre Initiative is really centred around our business grade fibre. We call it Enterprise Ethernet. And I guess the takeaway points from that is really it revolves around the speed. So now we can get up to 10,000 megabits per second upload and download. So perhaps very fortunate in Victor Harbour, you've all got fibre in the town centre. You might be getting speeds 100, 250 down or what have you, depending on what plan you're on, or maybe 50. But when we look at it there, you can get up to 10,000 if you want to, but there's lots of tiers in between. But the important thing to take away from that is it's about symmetrical speed. So it's not just your download, so when we're downloading our Netflix and so forth, but if we're thinking from a business perspective, what you're downloading every day, downloading your emails from what your customers or your clients or your suppliers are sending you, but also what you're uploading. So that's when it's really important that you have those symmetrical speeds, which the residential connection doesn't give you. So if you're, for example, a lot of businesses are now adapting to cloud-based services, so you want to be able to access that information and send it back up just as quickly. The great thing is, well, actually a couple of years ago, anyone could get access to business-grade fibre, but you would have to personally pay and fund for the infrastructure yourself, and it could literally be tens of thousands of dollars. But now with the initiative, we're actually subsidising that cost. So to 90% of businesses, and majority of businesses based in the Victor Harbour region can actually get access to that business grade fibre at $0 build cost, which is really exciting. The interesting other thing to know is, you don't need to have an NbN even if you wanted to have it as a residential service. You've got kids or you've got demands or what have you, or you've got, more and more devices being used in the home. You can obviously still access or choose to take up a business grade fibre if you just want the best of the best and the fastest that's possibly available. And the other thing I'll just mention as well is it also gives you priority data. So I was thinking about how I drove up here this morning. I live in Bridgewater. It was a bit of a drizzly, dark, slow drive up here this morning. It's mainly single lane traffic driving through Echunga and Macclesfield and so forth. And then you get stuck behind someone who's taking it very easy. They're doing 70 kilometres an hour and there's about 6 cars banked up behind them. But it's like you've got your own slip lane or your own overtaking lane, so you can get to bypass all of that congestion. So the same principle applies with data. So it doesn't matter what time of the day or night it is. I'm sure you all notice you get to a certain time in the day or in the afternoon, the kids get home from school, everyone's starting to log on and your speeds start to drop. But here you've got priority data, so you overtake all of that congestion. So once again, it's we want to make sure that the business grade fibre is the absolute premium experience. And I don't want to sound too salesy about this, but with the initiative as well over the last 2 years, we have had 2 decreases in the cost as well. Obviously, as a wholesaler, you would talk to your retail service provider to get an idea of the cost relevant to each speed tier. But it has decreased by about 68% in the last 2 years. So even if perhaps you inquired about it a couple of years ago, then you'll notice if you inquired again, there would be quite a large reduction. If you want to hear about a first-hand experience, I'm going to dob Michael in here. So Michael Schubert's actually took up EE a few months back, and he told me this morning that he is having a great experience with it, so that's good. Otherwise, I wouldn't have mentioned it if he was having a bad experience. So if anyone wants to understand first-hand the process or what have you, or what it's done to his business, I'm sure Michael wouldn't mind sharing that information. We can use you as our case study. And then just a quick update, and especially relevant to our Kangaroo Island counterparts. We've, in the last couple of months, we've announced some massive upgrades to our fixed wireless and satellite technologies. We're actually improving our fixed wireless content. I'm not sure if there's anyone in the room who is aware that this affects or is aware if they're on fixed wireless or satellite, but I'll give you a quick overview. So we're expanding that footprint now, and we're taking about 120,000 satellite customers and putting them onto our fixed wireless service, which means our satellite experience is going to be much better. And now, because we're in the process of doing that, we're also trialling to have an increase in our speed for satellite as well. So traditionally around 25 megabits per second. You guys in Victor Harbour, very lucky you don't have to deal with that. But potentially in satellite now we'll get up to 100 megabits per second download. And our fixed wireless, we've improved those speeds from about 50 megabits on average up to close to 250 megabits per second. But there is a trial going on with that now. We'll run for another couple of months, and all things going according to plan, then hopefully we can start switching those customers on. Did you have a question, Julie? Oh, sorry, I thought you're waving to me. Hi, nice to see you. Thanks for coming. Yeah, so I think I'll leave the rest up to the experts and hand over to Nigel. Thank you so much for listening. But, once again, I deplore this as I think about Michael Jordan often and the way that he's sort of lived his life and his mantras in his life. And I think if there's anything we can take away, it's be a little bit more like Mike and implement something into your business and make it happen, basically. Or in the words of Nike, just do it. Thank you so much. Oh, sorry, that's mine.
Thanks, Rachel. And that saying by Michael Jordan, obstacles don't have to stop you, I think is fairly profane for this particular session this morning. So thank you for that. And takeaway I'm getting from that is about having a resilient workplace. And all of us in this room, well, I think the majority of us are from businesses. And having that resilience and a digital strategy to me is very important in the process. And having a cybersecurity plan. How many businesses here actually have a cybersecurity plan? Can we see a show of hands? A couple. Who here has actually a cybersecurity policy? Yeah, a couple. Who here reckons they should have a cybersecurity policy? Most of us, yeah. And certainly I know at Business Victor Harbour, as the Chamber of Commerce, we are reviewing our particular policy right now. So it's very important that we have a policy in place. Mandated reporting is important for a business. Remember that if you're out there and you actually are involved in a breach, it is your responsibility and obligation that you report that breach, and we'll get that from Nick in a moment. But that's interesting information. About $33 billion it costs in cybercrime in this country. 33 billion. What we could do with that is anyone's business. And for a small to medium-sized business, the cost between 39,000 to 88,000. That's a huge cost to a business. And I know there are some businesses in this room that have been affected by hacks and by that crime, and have spent quite a bit of money in trying to resolve that particular issue or issues that they've had to deal with. I know Michael's one of them too. I'm sorry, Michael, to use your business again. It's not a plug for ShedX. Oops, I just said it. But really, at the end of the day, it's important that we can actually showcase, if you like, role model, how important this is about cybersecurity. I look at it this way. It's almost like if... has anyone been involved with someone coming into your home and stealing goods, or had their motor car stolen, or anyone in this room experienced that? I know I have. It's a violation. It's an awful feeling. It's like a feeling of being dirty. And I reckon this is the same sort of emotional intelligence we've got to take away from this. And it was interesting about your 10,000 megabits per second. And with AI on board now, I'm just wondering, does that mean my thoughts are there before I think it? Yeah. Thanks, Rachel. And again, please write down your questions. Get ready for those questions, because we'll have that in the panel, and certainly we can ask Rachel some questions in that time in the panel. What I'd like to do now is bring on Nick Sincock. Nick is the Assistant Director of Cyber and Infrastructure Security Outreach for South Australia in the Department of Home Affairs, which is federal. Nick's career in the department spans over 18 years, working in a range of operational and intelligence roles, and most recently in cybersecurity. Nick's role is to build and maintain strong and effective industry government partnerships, with a particular focus on engaging with small, medium-sized businesses, particularly those within the supply chain of critical infrastructure sectors. But I think as we're finding out now, everyone is actually involved in this. Even if you've got the tiniest supply chain, we're all involved. Nick assists in providing information on a range of cybersecurity issues and partnering with critical infrastructure entities to support the uplift of the security and resilience of Australia's critical infrastructure. I met Nick at Salisbury at the Commonwealth Bank last year, as I said, and I just found his information and how he works through the process of providing you in a simple way, if you like, because I'm a simple person, but in a very simple and logical way about what this all means to business and what it means to you and personally. It's very important that we understand that. So without any further ado, I'd like to bring on Nick Sincock.
Excuse me for a minute. Just adjust that. There we go. Okay, thanks for those kind words, Colin. And as introduced, my name's Nick, and thanks to you all for your time today. Really appreciate having you all here. I'm going to talk a little bit about cyber security. So what we'll do, just to run through the course content today, I'll set the scene. So we'll talk a little bit about the current threat environment or the threat landscape. We'll talk about the most common threats in Australia today, which I'm sure most of you will have heard of, and if you haven't, we can certainly cover across them. We might have a chance to go through a few case studies. We'll talk about what to do if you are subject to a cyber attack. I guess on the positive side, we'll direct you to some free information and resources. Now, on your tables are small business cybersecurity guides. Please feel free to take those, and they kind of summarise a lot of the points that we talk about today. They're quite a good resource to start with. So, like I said, where to go for free information and resources, and if we've got time towards the end, if Julie doesn't give me the wave, we can talk a little bit more about what obligations are in place for owners and operators of critical infrastructure assets and what that means for businesses within their supply chain. So I'm pretty confident there's probably not anyone in the room that is an asset owner or is an owner or operator of a critical infrastructure asset, but it's quite likely that you may be in the supply chain of one of those owners and operators. So we'll talk a little bit about their obligations and how that may filter down to you being in their supply chain. Okay, so let's talk about the current threat landscape. So over the 21-22 financial year, the deterioration of the global threat environment was reflected in cyberspace. Cybercrime was already on the rise, like we've mentioned before, costing up to $33 billion annually. Russia's invasion of Ukraine basically increased that cyber threat globally, particularly across the globe. So. In Australia, we saw an increase in the number and sophistication of cyber threats. We'll talk a little bit about the types, and Rachel stole a little bit of my, she stole a fair bit of my thunder, but that's okay because it's a message worth reiterating to you. And there's a couple of things that are really important on this slide. It is really a matter of when and not if that you will be subject to a cyber attack, unfortunately. We all need to really change our mindset to thinking it's not going to happen to us to it is going to happen to us. And when it does, how are we going to deal with that? That's obviously the reaction or the reactive sort of piece to it. We'll talk a bit today about proactive and how you can try and get in front of it, but as a business, you need to have that mindset that it is unfortunately really going to be a matter of when and how you best respond to that when that happens. So To cover off briefly, this is from the ACSC annual cyber threat report, and in the 21-22 financial year, 76,500 cyber crimes were reported to the ACSC, which is equivalent to one report of a cyber attack every 7 minutes, and that decreased or increased depending on how you're looking at it. The previous year it was one every 8 minutes, so obviously there was an increase to that figure. We spoke about the figure, that 39,000 for small business and 88,000 for medium. So just to let you know, small and medium are basically classed employees 200 or under. So if your business has employees 200 or under, you're a small or medium business. Average self-reported loss. So think as a small business, how and would you survive a cyber attack that cost you $39,000? That's the question that needs to be posed. And I think probably for most the answer is no. And for a lot of, I can't remember the figure off the top of my head, but there's a large portion of businesses that once they've been subject to a successful cyber attack, they don't survive. They have to close their doors within 6 months, or a period after, because they just cannot take that financial hit. And there's also obviously a reputational hit as well that can have effects. So the numbers are certainly worrying. What else can we talk about on that one? Financial losses to BEC. BEC, we'll talk about that a little bit further. That's called business email compromise. That's certainly on the rise. We'll talk about, like I said, we'll go into that in a little bit more detail later. The final point on there: no sector of the Australian economy is immune. Okay, and nothing could be more truer. Government, industry, families, individuals are all being targeted. They're throwing a wide net. Cyber criminals are throwing a wide net across the board, essentially, and seeing who they can catch by it. And really, there isn't any group or demographic sitting there going, "Oh, we're okay. They're not targeting us." Everyone is. Everyone is in the firing line. I think in the past, I was talking to Rachel and Nigel about this. In the past, small and medium business have historically thought that, well, we're too small. Why would someone want to target us? We just run our family business. We don't have anything particularly important or super valuable that someone would want to target. Unfortunately, because of that, it makes small and medium businesses more vulnerable. You may not have the time or the money or the resources to allocate to cyber security that some of the bigger businesses do, so you are more of a target. So it's really about, I guess, acknowledging that it's just a threat to small and medium business, and they are getting targeted, more than ever. The first point on there actually says that were reported. How many? If I can have a raise of hands, how many people here have unfortunately been subject to a cyber attack? Okay, and how many reported it to the Australian Cyber Security Centre when it happened? Okay, one from about 7 or 8. That's a perfect example of cyber attacks that have happened that haven't been reported. So these numbers here are based on what has been reported to the Australian Cyber Security Centre. So we've got no doubt that it's a lot higher. The real figures are a lot higher than what has been reported. So I guess that's what we'll talk a little bit about further on as well, the importance of reporting that information so that it gives the ACSC the full picture, I guess, in terms of how bad it is and where they can direct their resources and their expertise to best understand the whole picture. Okay, so obviously those figures are a little bit sobering, and people may look at it and go, "Oh, geez, well, what do we do? Where do we start?" So we promote cyber.gov.au as the one-stop shop, essentially, for free information resources, and all of that information in your guides is all from cyber.gov.au. So yeah, for individuals, for businesses, but basically the resources on there are excellent. And I'm not a tech genius. I'll be honest. I'm the first to admit that. I don't profess to be anything other than, but if I'm able to implement a lot of the resources that are through cyber.gov.au and in those small business cyber security guides, I've got no doubt that you're able to as well. That's including setting up passphrases and password managers for my parents on the weekend, which was a big task to implement that with them. We'll talk a bit more about password managers in a minute, but if I'm able to do that with them, I think as small business we should be able to implement a few of the steps. Okay, so probably one of the first things we look at is, okay, what's my current level of cyber security, or my current level of cyber maturity? And that's where this online assessment tool is really good. Again, it's on cyber.gov.au. So it's specifically designed for small and medium business, and it's, like I said, it's recommended if you want to get that immediate snapshot of what your current level of cyber maturity is. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes and asks you a range of questions, and then based on those answers, it'll then say to you, okay, you're at this level, and these are some of the things you need to do immediately. These are some of the things you need to think of doing in, say, 6 or 12 months' time, and it will give you recommendations, and it will refer you on to the resources that you can use, because you may not know what your maturity level is. So this will give you that really good snapshot. We sort of recommend to small and medium businesses that they do this initially, and then hopefully try and implement a few of the recommendations that are in that report. It's like a PDF report that you can export out, and then in 12 months' time, revisit it, do it again, and hopefully you've seen an increase in your maturity. There's always going to be work to do. You can see I think there's the four levels: starter, developing, graduate, and champion. I can tell you there's probably no one in this room that needs to be a champion level, okay? Because we're talking, absolute top critical infrastructure, massive, big business, endless amounts of money to be able to commit to cyber security. What it is, becoming more resilient than what you were yesterday. Okay, so it's about going from starter to developing if you can. And if you can do that, that makes you a lot less of a target, and that then means that the cyber criminals can move on to someone else and leave you and your business alone. Okay, so it's not about investing hundreds of thousands of dollars, which you don't have, into cyber security. It's just about improving yourself bit by bit to make you more resilient. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of the common cyber security threats. Let me see what the next slide is before I go on to it. Oh, that's that one there. Okay. So the three that we'll touch on are phishing, ransomware, and business email compromise. So let's get started on phishing. Okay, so phishing's certainly not a new technique. I think the first phishing emails were observed in Australia back in 2003, but obviously they've become increasingly sophisticated in recent years. I got a text on my work phone, of all things, as we walked in here today from Bendigo Bank saying, we need you to confirm your details. Can you click on this link? I'm not with Bendigo Bank, surprise, surprise. But, I'm sure you all have received emails and texts of that similar sort. Primarily, obviously, phishing, trying to get some information or that type of thing out of you. They're quite ingenious as to how they run. There's really popular Australia Post ones, obviously, with the increase in people receiving packages, constantly getting texts from Australia Post to pick up a package if I click on a link. There's a whole range of these texts and emails that are flying around, and really all they want you to do is click on that link. And that's the key message behind anything to do with phishing is you really need to think before you click on that link, both in a personal sense and even in a business sense. So phishing is a form of social engineering where a cyber threat actor will pose as a trustworthy colleague or an acquaintance to try and solicit information out of you or to gain access to your network. Okay, by clicking on that link, will grant them access to your computer. Okay, and imagine once they've got access to your computer, what they can do with that. Okay, they have access to your computer. They can send anyone in your supply chain or anyone in your business an email, and it will come from you. It will be completely legitimate. Okay, and that's obviously leading on. It can lead on to some other serious concerns. So, hence the importance of like it says on there, thinking before you click on that link. And I know it's a bit of a balance because obviously you want as a business, you want your employees to feel comfortable to not have to think for 5 minutes before they click on every email that they receive. But you really need to sort of look through that email before you click on it or that particular text and just think, okay, is this something I should be receiving or expecting? Because it only takes one click, unfortunately, to for things to go downhill. Okay, the next common threat is ransomware. Okay, and this remains one of the most disruptive threats to organisations, and as with the others, continues to grow in sophistication, boldness, and volume. This ransomware impacts everyone from consumers through to countries. So in May last year, the Costa Rican government declared a state of emergency following ransomware attacks on close to 30 of their government institutions, including health, finance, energy and social services departments. So whilst Australia hasn't yet experienced an incident of this scale, the potential remains for cyber criminals to cause widespread disruption. And as we've spoken about a few times already, last year we had the heavily publicised ransomware attacks on Optus and Medibank, and most recently the last couple of weeks with Latitude. So you can see on there's obviously noun of ransomware as to what exactly it is, and it is a type of malicious software that's designed to block access to a computer system, to your computer system, and the data that's on that until a sum of money is paid. So when that link is either downloaded or opened, ransomware will encrypt your files so that they can no longer be accessed. And then you'll hear from the cyber criminal saying, we want you to pay this amount of money and we'll give you your money, your data and your access to your systems back. I think what's probably more alarming is the second part about ransomware as a service. So it's existed for the best part of a decade, but it's become a lot more prevalent in recent years. And this is where criminals are able to purchase subscriptions for ransomware packages off of the dark web, just like we would be able to go and sign up for something off the normal internet. And what this now does is it actually opens the door for criminals who previously wouldn't have had the technical expertise to develop their own malware, to launch a ransomware. Normally, because of that, they wouldn't have been involved in this kind of extortion technique. But because it's now sold as a service, your everyday criminal can go on the dark web and purchase ransomware and then basically launch it wherever they like and make money the same way. So it's really widened to the market, whereas previously it was only a small portion of criminals. Now it can be open to anyone. And I've seen some ransomware notes where the organisation has been shut down, and you've seen the ransom note come up on their computer, and it is like a help desk. And I'm not embellishing this. It is, hello, really sorry to hear about what's happened with your organisation's systems and files. We are here to help you. all you need to do is give our friendly call centre a call on this number, and we can talk you through how to settle your current situation and get all of your data and information back. Have a great day. Here's the number, yada yada. And there is a help centre that you actually call, and they answer the phone and they talk you through it. It is an actual full-on service. Unfortunately, that's how big ransomware is at the moment. You could look at that and be confused that that's actually from someone trying to help me, as opposed to actually being from the cyber criminal who originally set ransomware up on my actual computer. But that's how it's basically solved. So I guess just to highlight to you the size and complexity of ransomware, and more often than not, phishing emails will launch ransomware, so they're kind of very closely aligned. Hence the importance, like we said, of clicking on that link. There's a slide there about the vectors of ransomware attacks. I won't go into too much detail on them because I think they're relatively straightforward. Email attachments, web pages, pop-ups, text messages. There's a range of them, and I don't really want to sort of make you too paranoid about not being able to open anything on your computer or mobile. It's just a mindset to keep in mind. Okay, so what do I do to protect against ransomware? So we'll discuss strategies on how to boost your overall cybersecurity posture in the next coming slides. But whilst on the subject of ransomware, we recommend users and administrators take a few preventative measures. So one of those is employing a data backup and recovery plan for all critical information, and we'll go into automatic backups in a minute. Keep your operating system and software up to date with the latest patches. That's to do with automatic updates on all of your devices, which I've got no doubt most of you will have particularly on your phones. We'll go into a little bit more detail about that. Restrict users' ability to install and run unwanted software applications, and apply the principle of least privilege to all systems and services. I'll talk a little bit more about that after as well. And the final point there is about not paying the ransom. Current government advice is to not pay the ransom, and the reason behind that is that it doesn't guarantee that you'll get your data back, and it also doesn't guarantee that you won't get hit again if the cyber criminals understand that you're willing to pay in the first place. Then they'll probably assume you'll then be willing to pay it again the second time around. So the current advice is to not pay the ransom. So the final threat we'll talk about today is business email compromise, and this is a form of cybercrime where criminals. So there's a couple of particular types. Criminals will compromise a business or personal email account, and they'll impersonate a co-worker, supplier, or business representative to try and scam their victims out of money or goods. Or criminals will impersonate business representatives using similar names, domains, and logos as a legitimate organisation. And both of these methods often appear legitimate, and they rarely rely on malicious links or attachments. So like we were talking about phishing and ransomware before, business email compromise is different and is quite often harder to detect, because it could be something as simple as you receiving an email from your boss saying, "Can you pay this invoice?" Or getting an email from your supplier saying, "We've just changed our bank account details. Can you pay all future invoices to these bank account details?" It comes from the same email address as the last one you got from them. It looks exactly the same because their system has been hacked into. Okay. Let me just see here. So when we spoke earlier about statistics to do with business email compromise, so self-reported losses in the 21-22 financial year increased to over $98 million, and the average loss per successful business email compromised increased to over $64,000. Okay, so again, think of, and what happens is the cyber criminals will look, once they hack into your business, they'll work out, okay, we'll have a look through all of the invoices that you're sending out to your suppliers. So we won't make it unrealistic. We won't ask a supplier to pay an invoice for $200,000 if they're only paying $15,000-$16,000 invoices. We'll make it realistic, but we'll send that to your whole supply chain. We'll send those emails to your whole supply chain and see how we go. So it's not completely random. A lot of it is targeted. They just want to get in the door, and once they do, it's quite it definitely can be damaging. And like I said at the start, the hard part is detecting it. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about how you can avoid it, or how you can I guess probably avoiding it is obviously the key. But let's talk about a particular case study that really hits home about business email compromise. So in this case study, a small business received an email from their supplier saying that they had changed their banks, and they provided new account details for invoice payments. And because the email looked legitimate, the construction business, they didn't call the supplier to confirm the change in bank account details. They paid the invoice for $70,000. The following day, unfortunately, another employee mistakenly paid the same invoice for another $70,000. So in total, $140,000 was paid to the new bank account. Not that it was a blessing in disguise, but when the business realised, hang on, we've paid this twice, they contacted the supplier to say, look, sorry, we've paid this twice, can you refund the $70,000? At which stage the supplier said, we don't know what you're talking about, they're not our bank account details, we didn't. We haven't changed our bank account details. So investigation was launched immediately, and the supplier discovered that their email accounts had been hacked, and that those emails were sent out to their whole supply chain. Unfortunately, no funds were recovered for that particular business. So I guess, how can you avoid that type of thing happening to your business when it comes to business email compromise? And probably the most practical and effective way to combat invoice fraud is to verify any change in bank account or payment details directly with the source, usually by an alternative communication methods. Don't reply to the email and say, is this Nick's, is this email from you, have you changed your bank account details? And I have heard of examples of that, and of course they come back and say, yeah, that's us, and then they go down that path. Call them up. And it may be something you incorporate into your own internal processes that, if invoices come through, we are going to verify it by phone with that person if they change their bank account details. That's just a stock standard procedure that we will do as a business. I've heard of other businesses, to be honest, that have gone even further, and they have set a benchmark for invoices, even if there is a change of bank account, even if there is not a change of bank account details, they may say, okay, $5,000 is the benchmark. If we get any invoice over $5,000, we are going to verify that. Take out the whole change of bank account details, that we'll do that as well. But even if we get, and what businesses have gone is, okay, what could we afford to lose? And they've set that benchmark, and then they just made that part of their internal process, that if they get an invoice, and I know it's not feasible for, depending on the volume of invoices that you do have, but I've known of businesses that have gone that step further, where they've just verified all of them to make sure. It may take a little bit of extra time, but if you think about the alternative and what it would be to lose that amount of money, it's certainly worth the effort. Okay, so what can businesses do? What can you guys do? Okay, what can we do to boost your resilience? So I think when we speak with organisations that have either been victim of a cyber attack or learning how to best protect their business, most people tend to think cyber breaches occur due to an IT issue. Okay, and they think that a really costly widget or piece of software is the solution. It's not always the case, and more often than not, we find that cyber breaches often occur to people issues. Okay, it's about training your people as opposed to software issues. You can go and buy the greatest widget ever in terms of software protection, but you can have one of your employees click on a link, and that software protection means nothing. Okay, so it's really a combination of of people and product when it comes to all things cyber. So with that being said, we'll go over a couple of pretty practical steps that you can take to enhance your cyber security. And as you can see there on the right-hand side, automatic updates, multi-factor authentication, passphrases, and automatic backups are the four that we'll touch on today. Okay, so passwords, and it is crossed out there, and that's for a reason. It's not just me being hopeless on PowerPoint. Passwords provide the first line of defence against unauthorised access to your computer and personal information, and therefore it's vital that you maintain strong passwords for all online accounts. The stronger your password, the more protected your computer will be from hackers and malicious software. So the exponential growth in password use and increasingly complex password requirements places a real unrealistic demand on users, and inevitably we'll all devise our own coping mechanisms to deal with what we say is password overload. So how many of you are still doing any of these things, using the same password across different systems? Using simple and predictable password creation strategies. And one of the best ones I've heard lately is they have to change their password every 3 months. So they just go, oh, well, currently it's autumn 2023. And then when it gets to winter, I'll go winter 2023 and work my way through the seasons. And every year I'll add the extra year on. Writing passwords down where they can be easily found, including on a document stored on your device. How many people are still doing those types of things? And I can say before I moved into the cybersecurity area, I was doing that last one. We were working for the government. We had that many usernames and passwords. I actually wrote it down on a Word document and saved it on my computer, not realising how unsafe that actually is. But nevertheless, the only way to best remember that many usernames and passwords. Unfortunately, the attackers exploit these well-known coping strategies, which can leave you vulnerable to different types of attacks. And to stress the importance of, and we'll get onto password managers in a minute, but to stress the importance, let's say you were a victim of the Optus attack and your username and password details were hacked. The first thing a cybercriminal would do with those usernames and passwords, or credentials as they're called, would be to run them through a whole heap of systems, particularly financial institutions, and hope that you are using the same username and password on Optus as what you are on ANZ or Bank SA or whoever you're banking with. And if that is the case, then they just get straight into your account. Now, fortunately with Optus, I don't think credentials were compromised, but think of that as the actual principle, that if you're using the same, particularly passwords, across your accounts, that's the type of thing that can happen and how you can get really stung. Whereas if you're using different ones across all of them, it's not an issue. If one account gets compromised, obviously it's not ideal, but that doesn't mean that they can have access to all of the other ones based on what you're on what you're doing with your passwords. Okay, so the slide here is about the time it takes a hacker to brute force your password in 2022. So we've been conditioned to think that alphanumeric passwords using a mix of upper and lowercase letters with special characters are complex and therefore highly secure. So let's go with Nick S, capital N, capital S, 1981, because that was the year I was born. That's a bit cheeky, and a question mark or exclamation mark at the end. All right, 5 years ago, that to me is like super complex password. No one's cracking that. But as you can see on the table in front of you, a complex 8-character password, which incidentally meets the criteria for most online accounts, can be cracked using today's GPU technology in 39 minutes. Okay, and a 7-character complex password takes just 31 seconds. On the other hand, a 14-character password using only upper and lowercase letters takes 64,000 years to crack. And obviously they're not going to be hanging around for that. After 5 minutes, they'll go, no, this is not happening. But put simply, we now know that when it comes to passwords, that length beats complexity. Okay, it's all about length now as opposed to complexity. The next question you're going to ask is, but how are we supposed to remember a 14-character password? all right? And that's where we then move into passphrases that replace passwords, okay? You can have a look on the slide here. A passphrase is a string of random words used for authentication that is longer than a traditional password, okay? They're harder to crack against common password attacks, and they're easier to remember than that complex password that you may have already set up. So you can have a look there on the outs and ins, okay? So if you were using any of the ones on the left-hand side there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, QWERTY, password, mum's name, Buddy Franklin, try and get rid of them and move to the ones on the right-hand side, okay? They are passphrases, and they are relatively easy to remember, okay? They're also, they're random words, Spain, sunshine, sausage, band, okay? Like we said, that takes, that takes 64,000 years or however much it is to try and crack, which means they're not even going to try, okay? The less predictable passphrase, the better. What else have I got to say about that particular one? Yeah, so the longer the passphrase, the better. The shortest example on that screen has 20 characters. Okay, so the next thing then is, all right, Nick, you're saying go to passphrases. How am I going to remember passphrases for my 20 accounts that I need to access on a daily basis, okay? And that's where we recommend the use of a password manager, okay? A password manager is an app that you can save to your phone or on your computer to store all of your passphrases, okay? Using one will free you of the burden of remembering which passphrase goes where. So using a password manager, you can generate, store, and apply strong phrases for all of your websites and online accounts, okay? So you can see there's security and convenience, okay? Obviously, there's the security side of things. With a password manager, you have one master password, okay? So let's say that is Spain, sausage, shine, band, okay? That's your master password. That is the only password you need to remember. Passphrase that you need to remember. When you open up your password manager, it will have all of the accounts, username and password. It will generate all of those passwords for you, and they'll all be stored there, okay? So not only is it secure, but it's then convenient. You have them all listed. You only need to remember one master password. And like I was saying, I set this up for my parents on the weekend, and it took me a while to explain to them, you only need to remember one password, Dad, Mum, that's all you need to know. That will get you in. And from there, you then have access to all of them, and they will run there for you. Normally, this is where someone will ask, well, what about if my password manager gets hacked? Okay. Password managers have military grade encryption on them. They are one of the hardest things to crack. There are a few password manager companies that have been hacked, and none of the data in anyone's password managers has been compromised due to the level of encryption on those. So they are as secure, and they are far better than the alternative of being on a document in your PC or being on a piece of paper that you put in your top drawer, or wherever else you store your passwords currently. Sorry, Julie, was that 5 minutes, did you say? Yep, cool, okay. I'll skip through we'll go into multi-factor authentication. Yeah, okay. I'm talking a bit too much up here, Nick. So multi-factor authentication is a security measure that requires 2 or more proofs of identity to grant you access to your accounts. So it's normally a combination of something you know, which is a passphrase or a PIN, something you have, which can be a physical token or an authenticator app, and something you are, which can be a fingerprint or an eye retina scan or another biometric. Okay, you've probably already got a few accounts, MyGov and a few others, maybe banking accounts where you are required to use multi-factor authentication. It's a really, really strong protection against cyber attacks, and I would strongly urge as a business for you to set multi-factor authentication up on all of your accounts that have got very sensitive personal or financial information, and do that in your personal life as well. All of your banking, if you get on to try and do MFA on all your banking where you can. Then we have automatic updates. Now, we spoke about this with devices, okay? So Try and set up automatic updates on all of your devices where able to. It's a relatively easy feature to do. I always thought my mobile phone just needed to be updated so it would look nicer, and they would change the aesthetics of it. And it's not just about the aesthetics, it's also about the security. Okay, every time you update your device, it makes it stronger. It patches particular parts of that phone that make it stronger. So try and set automatic updates on all of your devices, and that will certainly make them stronger. And the last one we'll talk about really is about automatic backups. Okay, and this is where an automatic a backup is a digital copy of your most important information. Okay, so all businesses, regardless of size, should take regular backups of important data. And it's where you connect to your system and basically have on your backup all of that data, so that if you do get subject to a ransomware attack, you can pull that backup out, plug it back in, and you'll have all of your data. It's a really, and it's outlined in the cybersecurity guide, but that's certainly something that is worth having a look at, and also making sure you test those backups so that you do have, you are protected if something like that does happen. There's a couple of resources on cyber.gov.au that I'll quickly work through. So Have You Been Hacked is a 5-minute quiz where it steps potential victims through a series of scenarios to help assess if you've been hacked and how to respond if that happens. Really good, and it covers a whole heap of scenarios: ransomware attacks, phishing, business email compromise. Asks you a series of questions and then we'll tell you, okay, yes, this has happened, this is what you need to do, and basically go from there. There's a range of other ACSC resources. One of those is on your table today, the Small Business Cybersecurity Guide. So like I said, feel free to have a look through that. That's got some really, really good resources. Okay, what else can you do? Know how to report a cybersecurity incident or cybercrime. Okay, the ACSC has a 24/7 hotline on 1300 Cyber 1 if you need help. Knowing your networks. Contacting if you are using a managed service provider and making sure that they've got appropriate steps in place. Third point there, preparing for a cybersecurity incident by having an incident response business continuity plan in place and testing it where you are able to. So something that you certainly want to be having a look at, and cyber.gov.au will have information on how to start that particular process. And probably one of the last slides I'll go through, because I know we're hard pressed on time, and you've all come here to see Nigel talk rather than myself. What are other hazards or risks to your business? So cyber's not the only one that you need to be aware of. There's physical and natural risks. There's personnel risks. And some of these can be through a cyber vector. So, you can have a trusted insider or a disgruntled employee that can be a personnel risk. If they leave the business and they still have access, they can still do some damage despite that. So you always need to be aware of that. And then the last one there is supply chain. Okay, so like I said right at the beginning, you may think that you're small enough, but you may be in the supply chain of a business that they want to target, and they may do it through you. They may want to try and get into your systems, compromise your email accounts to then get to your bigger business in your supply chain. Okay, so I think we can skip over those ones, that's fine. Right, so I think that's it from me for today, and questions I'm assuming we'll probably hold for the panel session, but there is a QR code on there if anyone does want to provide some feedback on the information today, or you can provide it through Colin and his team. But I hope that gives you a bit of a snapshot of the current threat environment, the types of cyber threats there are, a few things that you can do to make yourself less of a target that are relatively easy, and yeah, hopefully you've taken something out of the session today. Thanks very much.
Wow, there's a lot of information now, I'm sure, that everyone's sort of been prompted to take home, and certainly some takeaways there. What I'd like to do now, we're going to have a 5-minute break. Thank you again, Nick, for your presentation. We're going to have a 5-minute break, just 5 minutes, and then we'll come back with Crime Stoppers with Nigel Smart. So if you don't mind, and also there's some information I'd like to give you about taxation as well, so I'll give that to you after the break. So if we can have a 5-minute break and back here at, what's that, 7 past, if we can, thank you, roughly. Is that right, 7 past 9? Yeah, 9:07. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you for staying around. I know it's going to finish probably around 9:30. So thank you for those businesses that have committed themselves to staying, and to those businesses online that are viewing this at the moment. Thank you for that. And again, Nick, thank you for your presentation. There was a lot of information in there. We're also going to provide everyone who's attended this workshop with the presentations. So don't feel that you've got to write voluminous notes, but I'm hoping you are writing voluminous questions, because there's a lot of questions that I have, and I'm only just talking from Business Victor Harbour's perspective, and also personally, that I have with all this. To give you an example, I went online and bought some, I thought I was doing the right thing and bought some modems from the US, because I thought I needed them. I had no idea what I needed in my household. I thought these modems might do the real good thing for me. I still haven't plugged them in. They're still sitting in the cupboard at home. And about 6 months later, after I'd purchased those and received them, I got this phone call. And it was this lady with an American accent. She said, excuse me, we'd like to upgrade your modem. I said, what are you talking about? And they said, the modem you purchased needs to be upgraded. We've got a fault in it. I said, oh, that's interesting. I said, so what do I need to do? She said, well, what you need to do, you need to go to that modem. Is it plugged in at the moment? I said, no, I haven't got around to that yet. And we had that discussion about, well, why haven't you plugged it in? I said, well, I haven't had time, blah, blah, blah. And she said, well, would you mind plugging it in? And I had bought 2 of them. So I thought, this is great because I can actually use the modems from one room to the next, and it would make things flow better. I had no idea what I was doing. And she said, well, can you go do that now? I said, no, look, I don't have the time. Just ring me back a bit later. So sure enough, about a month later, I get this phone call from this person. I thought it was the same lady, but I think she had a different accent. But was certainly American, but it sounded like Colombian American, that sort of accent. And they said, oh, yeah, you've got this modem. We need to upgrade it, these modems. I said, well, how do you know I've got these modems? Well, we know because this is your last 4 numbers in your MasterCard. I said, oh, okay. I didn't say yes. I didn't agree. I didn't say yes, that's right. Anyway, they went through this process. I said, look, I'm not bothered by this. I don't want to do this, because all of a sudden I'm actually thinking this is a bit of a scam. And I thought, no, I don't want to do this. I said, look, why don't you get back to me a bit later on, because I need to think about this. 6 months later, I get another phone call from a gentleman, American, and he said, would you like to go and get your modems and we need to upgrade them? I said, no, I don't want to do that. And in between all this, I hadn't had a problem with my home internet and everything else. It was working fine. And I still got these modems and these packages sitting in the cupboard. They're still there. And he got a bit toey with me. He said, well, why don't you want to do it? I said, because I don't trust who you are. And quite honestly, I'm not bothered by all this gobbledygook. Go away. A month later, after that, I get another phone call from this lady, and she ripped into me, totally ripped into me, very unprofessional, calling me all the names under the sun, including expletive swear words. And I said, look, please go away. And then what I did at that stage is I reported it. I reported it to through the special hotline and told them of this incident. They said they'll investigate it, blah, blah, blah. But that actually sent shivers down my spine. I'm thinking, here I am purchasing online, thinking that I'm doing the right thing, but it was a technology issue, and thinking this would be secure. And as they explained to me when I spoke and reported that, they said, well, what they could be doing is they could have found your invoice or something in a waste dump somewhere, picked it up, and started to connect everything together and try and scam your particular accounts. And they said, you've done the right thing. But I had no idea what sort of world I was living in when it came to all that. So that's just another, simple home example of what can happen when you purchase this sort of equipment. Okay, so, and again, back to Nick. Nick, you obviously see a lot of issues inside your world. And by the way, Julian Scott from SAPOL apologised for not being here this morning, and it would have been good for him to be on the panel too, because Julian heads up a lot of the cyber area in SAPOL. And he wanted to be here, but we got Nick, which is even better. So thank you for being here. The other bit that came to mind was about how organised hackers can be, this organised crime. And I guess when Nigel comes up in a moment, he'll talk about that. This is totally organised. They aren't scared. They're not worried about who they're going to impact on. Like I said, some of these people don't have to be that intelligent to do this, but some of them are quite intelligent. And they know how to crack these systems. And some of them there could be a person here in Victor Harbour doing it, who knows? So they don't have to be overseas. They can be local. All right. So Nigel Smart. Nigel Smart is a highly experienced senior leader with demonstrated capacity to positively drive business and people outcomes. Previously the Chief Operating Officer of the Adelaide Football Club for 8 years, Nigel now leads Crime Stoppers SA, one of the most trusted brands in the state. Nigel enjoys mixing business strategy, commercial outcomes, and working in community organisations that have positive impact. Crime Stoppers SA role and purpose remains the same, but its technology, content, and the way the organisation connects to community needs to be constantly changing. I've known Nigel for some time now. I've got to say, I did actually have a Freudian slip with Nigel this morning. I said, Nigel, what time did you leave this morning? Oh, about 5:15 or 5:30 or whatever in the morning to get here. Mind you, he came off the plane last night from Melbourne and got home around about 8 o'clock. So I really appreciate Nigel being here and obviously heading up Crime Stoppers SA as their Chief Executive Officer. But I had this Freudian slip with him and I said, mate, you didn't hit any roos in the way. And then I thought about it, I'm thinking, 98 grand final, the roos. Yeah, maybe. And that was, I reckon that was one of your best games, Nigel. And sorry to bring the Crows into it, but I'm an ardent Crows supporter. What's going to happen on Saturday night, who knows? It's anyone's business, anyone's game. But at the end of the day, it's great to have Nigel here in this particular workshop. And I'd like to bring him on board. Nigel Smart.
Righty, I reckon you get rid of the modems, chuck them in the bin. All right. They're phone calls every month. Just get rid of them. You're not using them anyway, Colin. Hey, it's good to be here. I know you've had a lot of presentations. I've got a few slides to go through. In regards to cyber, all I can say is it's increasingly an issue. I deal with local service area commanders. There are 7 SAPOL commanders across regional South Australia, and then there's 4 metro commanders. Cyber and cyber-related theft and issues is a bigger and bigger issue for those commanders to deal with. So when I'm out at on the Eyre Peninsula speaking to Commander Paul Barr, cyber-related theft, they're spending more and more time on it as a command unit. Their investigators are then having time and resources to actually investigate those issues. So it is an element that is of concern to SAPOL, and technology is moving really quickly. The question is law enforcement moving as quick? And that's probably the the nub of the issue. Let's see if we can go here. This slide, you're going to get this deck. Crime Stoppers, most people would have heard of Crime Stoppers. There are things that you don't know about Crime Stoppers, and this is probably what I'm going to talk to you about today. We've been going since 1996. We've put away over 20,000 criminals and solved over 32,000 crimes. We solve about 25 crimes a week through the information that is received by Crime Stoppers. Primarily, Crime Stoppers is about, we don't give a stuff who you are, we just are interested in what you know. And we provide a platform of engagement. We are not the police. We have a joint partnership with police. It's really unique. It gives myself the ability to meet high-level officers and talk about their issues and how we can support them in particular areas, sector crimes. We've got a shoplift campaign happening next week. That'll be phase 2 of our shop theft campaign. But we work with SAPOL primarily on crime-related matters that they need support on. This is what we'll go through today. I'm not going to be up here for 15 or 20 minutes. I'm going to be here for 10 minutes and then out. So who we are, what we do, our team, what's our history, our partnership with SAPOL, our contribution. I'm going to touch on cyber. We did a business SA survey for their businesses a year or so ago. There were some cyber elements that came out of that, and I'll talk to that at the end. The issue we have with cybercrime is the information we get on our platform is anonymous. We don't know your identity. So if you're a victim of cybercrime, you may as well not report it to Crime Stoppers because you're the victim of the crime and you can't be anonymous if you're the victim. So we have this kind of issue, but what we can do is be a platform of engagement with the community, and we do change behaviours, and I'll touch on that on how we do that in terms of sector-related or crime issues that police are having, and we support the public in making them aware of those issues and how they can change their behaviours. Crime Stoppers is international, so we're across the globe. It started in America. There was a bank robbery in Albuquerque, and they couldn't solve the crime, so they reenacted the crime on TV, and they asked the public to call in, and they did. And people called in, and they solved that crime. And from that one element, many, many, many years ago, Crime Stoppers started in the States. Crime Stoppers is international. There's Crime Stoppers United Kingdom, Crime Stoppers Canada, Crime Stoppers US, and Crime Stoppers Australia. It's a federated model here in Australia. Police are very territorial, so I look after Crime Stoppers South Australia, and they're in every state and territory. And then we have an overarching Crime Stoppers Australia board at this present moment. We are doing a national illicit drugs campaign that started yesterday, and we'll roll out a 6-month campaign funded by Home Affairs over the next 6 months, basically on organised crime. And organised crime and focus on organised crime is an element. Organised crime operate from shop theft. Shoplifting is an issue for retail outlets, and your shoplifter, your recidivist shoplifter, will do 60% of the shoplifting. And that crime that they're undertaking, a lot of the proceeds from those crimes are via organised crime, whether it's high-value meat, liquor, and the two biggest issues in shop theft, which is interesting, is liquor and Lego. Okay, liquor and Lego are the two most sought after items. Okay, so if you own the Lego store down here, all right, you're probably aware that it's probably in demand. Who we are an actual charity. This slide is, we are a charity. We have an independent board. We are not owned or managed by SAPOL, but we have a really interesting MOU with SAPOL, which is about to be renewed. It gives us the ability to work with SAPOL and support them and their outcomes. So from my point of view, I deal with major crime on murders and homicides and missing people, and we've got a new content series that we're creating with major crime. right through to Operation Measure, which is our shop theft crime. So shop theft, we'll have a phase 2 of that. We'll identify using CCTV and TV footage recidivist shoplifters. We'll post that content, and then we'll ask the public to identify those particular individuals that are creating havoc for a lot of retail outlets, both regionally and also metro-wise. Talk about trust. People trust Crime Stoppers, been around a long time. These percentages, most people are happy, one, to report crime anonymously, and two, they trust Crime Stoppers in terms of that particular platform. It's protected by law. The only way it's not protected if you threaten life within the call. And we had one probably 2 months ago where someone rang Crime Stoppers and they actually threatened, I'll step down here, they actually threatened to blow up something in Rundle Mall. So the threat came via the 1-800 number, and police, because it was threatening life, had to go to a higher level to get approval, but then they found out the phone number, and then apprehended that particular individual that made that threat on life. So, but everyone else is anonymous, and it's protected. That's our small team. We have Sharon is our chair. I'm technically the first CEO the organisation's had. We've been a board-led organisation for many years, and now we're reverting back to management-led. And we have a small team. We have some services provided by SAPOL. But when we talk about crime, and this is probably a directional piece, we are moving from a strategic point, is we're about to partner with Department of Environment and Planning on a range of crimes involving water, native vegetation clearing, marine parks. So those particular areas in this regional community, yes, if someone wants to report anonymously that they know farmer X next door is clearing vegetation illegally, yeah, they can report it via Crime Stoppers, and that will get to the department investigators. So we are starting to diversify our partnerships. The way I look at it is police is our major client, but we can have other clients in other sectors. That's a little timeline of what we do. Over 1996, we have a partnership with Channel 9, a partnership with Police Credit Union. We are on socials, but where we are going, this is why technology is moving so quickly, is we have to keep up with what is content doing, where are we positioning our content, how do we use content and tailor content on specific crime initiatives in specific areas. So if Victor Harbour, the Deputy Mayor, where is the Deputy Mayor? There's the Deputy Mayor. If the Deputy Mayor said, crikey, Victor Harbour's got this crime issue, they'll knock on the door of SAPOL, can you help us? And SAPOL may or may not be able to do something. They can actually knock on the door of Crime Stoppers as well and say, Smarty, can you come and do something on this initiative? We need some more intelligence from an anonymous to try and nip it in the bud. Councils can do that. Regions can do that if they want. So one of the reasons why I'm talking today is to make you aware that we are a tool within the toolkit. It's just most people don't understand that. This slide, we do have a partnership with SAPOL. We will partner with other agencies in the future, but every dollar spent on Crime Stoppers is about $11 return for the community, just through the work that we do. A slide, I gave a presentation last week to the investigators of all the government agencies. And I didn't realise this, that 60% of the intelligence held within police comes from Crime Stoppers information. When you think about that, that's a lot of intel that comes in. So, enormous amount. Our contribution to South Australia, as I said, we've caught over 21,000 criminals. 25 crimes a week are solved by Crime Stoppers. $9 million worth of recovery of stolen goods. and 145,000 actions issued to police investigations. So we have a bit of a crack. Our campaigns, we have numerous campaigns. We've just launched, it was a really soft launch here, we didn't really do anything, a national illicit drugs campaign on a national level. That will go for 6 months. We're doing major freight routes through Murray Bridge, Riverland, Mount Gambier, the Port of Port Lincoln, focused on organised crime and drugs for the next 6 months. We have a shoplift theft campaign that's not on there, but we'll be launching that in the next week or two with SAPOL, focused on liquor theft, and a range of community or regional initiatives along with that. These are a snapshot of what we call, what does success look like? It's really hard for Crime Stoppers. What does success look like? It's probably, we want to reduce crime, but if there wasn't any crime, then we don't exist. So, but there's always going to be a crime. It's an industry that keeps on giving. It's been happening for thousands of years. So last year, 66 firearms located. That's the highest in the last 5 years. 347 apprehensions, 19,000 calls. The year previously, it was 30,000, a COVID year. So there's been a drop in calls. Online tips, we actually realised that the numbers from SAPOL, they're the tips that led to investigations. You probably double that in terms of overall tips through the system. And that's last year's results anyway. Crime, cybercrime business. For me, cybercrime is an opportunity for Crime Stoppers to play a part, and we're still trying to work out how do we play a bigger part. We're probably more a community engagement piece at this point in time. If you suffer cybercrime, most of those calls will either go to SAPOL or to ScamWatch, okay, those two vehicles. For us, it's a little bit difficult if you're a victim, for the victim to report via Crime Stoppers, because you'll disclose your name anyway through that process. So there's a little bit of information that's been covered already by participants here, but Business SA and ourselves did some research, and there's no doubt that most of Business SA members are worried about cybercrime as their highest priority in terms of crime element. As you said, malware, data breaches are concerning. And what can we do? One, we can act as a bit of a victims report by ScamWatch or police. We can also support police, whether that's regional or metro. The nature of the crime makes it very hard for us to identify who the people are perpetuating the crime. Many of these issues, and I got 3 calls from Telstra last week, even in the last week, just ringing up is Telstra, and I say, no, you're not, you're lying, and they hang up. So everyone's getting hammered, okay, with issues, whether that's on your phone, mobile, internet. We do find it difficult to use Crime Stoppers as that vehicle. We do play an enormous role within the community in terms of awareness and engagement. So we can play a role both regionally and metro in terms of spreading the message. We do get police ringing Crime Stoppers to help them fight crime in an area. So it usually happens on crime, motor vehicle crime, where people are walking along opportunistic opening cars. Police find that very hard to stop, and it's usually a minority of people doing that crime. We can come in and run a geofenced and targeted crime initiative to bring an end to that. And our evidence and case studies picks that a 4 to 6 week crime focused on a particular area will reduce crime. In Mawson Lakes, we reduced it by 40%. In Prospect, it was down by 50%. Just purely and simply making people aware, lock your cars, there's crime in the area, we're trying to identify the people of interest, okay, who are doing the crime. We do have some educational materials on cyber within our curriculum. we can and support, whether it's ScamWatch or others, on cyber awareness, and we work with police and government and business on prevention activities. But it is a challenging space for us because, one, it's an expanding space. SAPOL are spending more resource in that space. And then what is our engagement from a platform point of view on cybercrime? It's one where we see we can play a part, but because the victims are reporting it, it makes it difficult for us to be a more important part. And that brings me to the end of that presentation. It was a real quick kind of bang, bang, bang. Here's Crime Stoppers in a whole. I just wanted to give you an understanding of it. On cyber, many of you, because you're small or medium, if you're directors, if you go to the AICD, there's a cyber safety principles. If you Google that, it'll come up. It's a really good list for directors to run through your responsibilities as directors in regards to cyber-related incidents in the workplace. Really simple elements to put in place, from risk management and strategy. So there's lots of resource out there. But Nick was comprehensive. I'm thinking about my passwords, going, okay, I probably should change a couple of them. And I just looked in my password manager, and I had 101 passwords, okay, in my password manager. So password manager does work, all right, it's actually a good thing, but I don't know how I got to 101 passwords, but everyone seems to want a password. Hey, thanks for allowing me to talk today, and yep, throw away the modems, Colin. Thank you.
Thanks, Nigel. Look, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to call up the presenters in a minute, and we'll have a question and answer. But there's just a couple of things I needed to mention. And again, Nigel, thank you for that presentation. And we can see the connection between Crime Stoppers, or the sort of connection, if you like, between Crime Stoppers and cybercrime. Michael Schubert, my chair, brought to the attention that for small businesses under $50 million turnover a year, you can now, for setting up your infrastructure for cybersecurity and digital strategy, if there's a cost of that, you can get 120% tax deduction through the tax office up until the 30th of June. So the other thing I want to impress on you, you need to have cyber insurance. It's critical as a small business, even as a micro business, that you have cyber insurance. And if you haven't done that, please get that happening. It's very important that you do that. And we're planning to have some insurance companies talk to us about cyber insurance down the track when we follow up with this particular workshop. And the one there about risk management with directors of businesses, that's important. Thanks for pointing that out to us, Nigel. That's very important indeed. So what I'd like to do is bring up I'll call it the panel. We'll get these chairs rearranged here, and then we can have our Q&A if that's all right with everyone. And then I think we'll be on our way. Okay, so there's a rope. Sorry, is that all right? Can everyone see everyone? Is that okay? Does that work out? Yep. And actually, before I do, I'd like to thank Roxy at the back there. He's setting up all the infrastructure here today on the technology and the streaming and everything else. So thank you to Roxy Music. Is it Roxy Music? Is that what you're called? Yeah, I'll call them that anyway. That'll do. This is the open floor, and there's a roving mic. Julie has the roving mic for Q&A. Again, I'm not going to ask any questions yet. I'll just wait until the questions come through. That's all right. Julie, do we have any questions coming from the remote communities that are out there?
We do. We had a question about hovering your mouse over an address. So there was traditionally, if you didn't recognise the address, you should ignore it, and people would hover to see the address. Is that a risk to hover? I'm not talking about me personally. I'm actually talking about emails. Email addresses.
Yeah, good question. I don't know. I couldn't 100% say with certainty yes or no, but hovering, as long as you're not clicking, hovering over to identify an address can often assist you in saying, hang on, that's not the address that it should be. So I'm assuming that's where the question is, whether it's safe to do that, and I believe it is.
Yep.
It's clicking on it that is where the danger that then launches into the actual malware. So, and I actually think that's a technique that you can use to identify if you're not sure about the link. You can hover over it and see where it's going to take you to, and if that doesn't look like the address that it should be, then that's the first warning sign. So yeah.
And another question we had was about mandatory reporting. So that's just a concern because of the fines, and that if you're aware of an incident and you don't report it, and it can be tracked back to you, just to reiterate that is a serious...
Yeah, so I mean there's reporting for data breaches, which I believe I don't know a lot about the notifiable data breach, but I do believe that's mandatory if there's been a data breach as a business for you to report. So I know that's definitely mandatory. In terms of an actual cyber attack, unless you're an owner and operator of a critical infrastructure asset, there is actually no mandatory reporting obligation. Hence what I was sort of speaking about in my slides, in that it's quite underreported because it's not mandatory. That's to do with a general cyber attack on your business. But if there's been an attack and a data breach, then it's my understanding it's definitely mandatory to report that through the notifiable data breaches system or policy. I can't remember what it's actually called. So we would strongly recommend either way you report, even if it's an unsuccessful cyber attack. Still reporting that through is the best way to go.
Can you hear me? Yep. Oh, that's good. Look, I promise there's a question coming. I just need to, first of all, thank all the speakers. Thank you very much. Rachel, that was a good start, and Nick and Nigel. I've never heard about Crime Stoppers. I know of Crime Stoppers, didn't know a first thing about it, and it was really very interesting. Thank you. It just, and please don't take this the wrong way, sounds a bit like Ghostbusters, but I think you need a theme tune because it's very catchy. So,
hey, if you give me a car like they've got, I can drive around and have a bit of music playing, that'd be pretty cool.
Which brings me to my next question. And Rachel, you gave a very good analogy about driving down through Meadows or wherever you're coming this morning through the rain, and it occurred to me that when you're driving, there's a good close analogy, but it's not quite close enough yet. I was driving down the Victor Harbour Road at one stage, and there was a guy coming down the other side of the road, and he was a bit erratic, and I thought, oh God, there's never a cop around when you need one. And then he went past on the wrong side of the road, forcing cars off the road, and the car immediately in front of me suddenly whacked his little light on his roof and put his blue lights on, and he pulled him over so fast. I thought, you beaut, thank God for that. So every now and again there is a cop when you need one, but which comes back to the question, and Nigel did touch on this slightly with the reference to cybercrime there, but if somebody's broken the speed limit on the road or doing something, there's plenty of rules in place and plenty of opportunities to catch them. They might get away with it a while, but somebody's going to get them, hopefully, before they do too much damage. That's not quite the same with us and the cybercrime stuff at this stage. We're all learning to get 22 character passwords and things like this to protect ourselves, and the game keeps getting elevated. Nigel or anybody, is anybody actually setting out to basically set people up who are trying to do this thing, get in there, and we can hover over things and find out where they are, and it's electronic banking these days. Should be able to track them down electronically. Why can't we? Why can't we stop these guys? They're using about half of our bandwidth.
The response to your question is twofold. One, I'll start it off and Nick can finish off. Technology is moving really quickly and society is trying to keep up with it. So it's really interesting for different age demographics and how that use and adoption of technology and how people are using it. So law enforcement is no different. SAPOL is not the most innovative company, but it is quite safe. But in terms of resource and man hours and focus, this is going to be an area, investigation of theft, okay, through digital means is going to become a bigger and bigger issue for SAPOL and how they manage it from a resource point of view. To the local jurisdiction here, the police and their expertise on the matter, I can't really make comment on that, but I do know from a regional point of view, they're going to have some challenges. But they also have challenges with farm crime. So 42% of farmers, okay, don't report crime, okay, and the Flu area has a range of farmers and communities that probably there's crime being committed. Wood theft is an issue. In the Barossa, we're about to do a partnership and crime campaign on wood theft. Wood theft is an issue. If you're paying $500 a tonne for wood, people are going to steal it and they're going to put it on marketplace. You've got a range of crime elements that are challenging, but the cyber one and theft through digital means, passwords, it's going to be ongoing. It's not going away. It's only going to get probably more.
Yeah, and to elaborate on that, cybercrime is so different to traditional forms of crime. So someone breaks into a house, hopefully you have CCTV footage or you have witnesses, or you're able to someone sees something somewhere that's able to report that, which then leads on to an investigation. Unfortunately, with most cybercrime, it's committed either internationally, it could be Collins modems, someone in Central America trying to sitting on a computer in there, and their level of technical capacity is such that it's very hard to trace them. So it is very hard to pin cybercrime on anyone in particular. And unfortunately, that is the nature of the beast that is cybercrime. I know the Australian Cyber Security Centre are launching their own offensive capability where they actually have a number of staff that basically go on the offence in terms of shutting down cyber threats from state-sponsored enemies or adversaries, whatever you do want to call them. But that's at the higher level. That's to try and disrupt any attempts on our critical infrastructure. So if anyone's trying to shut down energy or water or those types of things, they're trying to disrupt that. Unfortunately, that doesn't filter. Well, it may in a little way, but it doesn't filter down to help small or medium business or the lower sort of end of the chain when it comes to that. So, unfortunately, it's really, really hard to prove and to pin on anyone in terms of cybercrime because of the nature of what it is.
We've got Kirsty from Reds here who'd like to say something.
Hey guys, thanks for coming today. Probably a question for Nick, I think. Recently we use like a messaging platform like Messenger, but it's not Messenger. Recently we had someone in that group who was hacked, and I think it was like a ransomware hack. So he was, asked to pay money for whatever, or else they'd hack his system, I think. So anyway, somehow they got into our chat and used my name and put a message on our group chat that came from my profile. We blocked it all, we got rid of it all straight away. Nothing else has happened since, but I'm just wondering how deep can they get, whether it's just in our group chat or if can they get into my phone? Like it was just on his phone. But how deep can that get once it's sort of...
I mean, it depends on their level of expertise as to how and the desire for them to do that. What's the benefit for them to do that? What's the benefit for them to get into your entire system to then be able to send out emails or compromise your system? I'm assuming you've got an IT area or an IT person that you engaged. That's a good start, obviously. And if you think that you have addressed the issue, that's great. Obviously, the IT issue, the IT area, you would want them to be able to monitor your networks and systems to make sure there's not any unusual activity, because if there is, that could be a sign that they're still in there. Okay, they're still in the network. And I guess that's where, if you're a small, medium business that doesn't have an IT area, okay, or an IT person, then that may be at the point where you need to not employ someone, you need to seek the services of an IT professional to say, this is what's happened, like use that as an example. We want to make sure that they're not still in there. Are you able to assist with that? Because cyber criminals can sit within your system for as long as they like, essentially, if there's the desire there for them to exploit and scam, and they can stay in there as long as they like, and they can stay in there, undetected a lot of the time to your everyday person like us. An IT officer or someone who's a bit more of a, they tend to be able to detect based on unusual activity, and it's also you personally monitoring your emails and making sure there's nothing unusual on there in terms of emails that have sent. I usually check my sent items email every couple of weeks, to be perfectly honest. I have a bit of just a scan through to make sure, yep, and I'm federal government, yep, okay, yeah, that was from me, just to make sure there's nothing in there that might have been sent on my behalf. So that's the type of thing you can do personally. But yeah, I know that's probably not a particular, not a really clear answer, but you're at least hopefully on the right track. But they could still certainly be in there on your network, just waiting for another opportunity. Yeah.
Well, we deleted all of the groups that we were using and everything. The person that was involved isn't with us anymore, so we don't have any of his information on our system or anything like that. So hopefully that's enough, and there's been no other activity since then. So yeah, hopefully that's enough.
Hopefully that's the last you've seen and heard of it. But yeah, always stay vigilant, because you got in there once, they could get in there again. And that's where we talk about the overall security and resilience of your business, making sure every staff member is contributing to that in terms of passphrases and those types of things, so that it makes it harder. Every link along that chain is hopefully secure, and that protects you all. Because if one gets interrogated, compromised, it can filter on really easily. And your example is a perfect example of that. Yeah.
Now we have, Deputy Mayor David Kemp. Sorry.
I was just going to say, romance scams, would they be classified as a cyber-related scam or not? Or is that just fraud? Yeah, I would think fraud. Sorry, just a conversation.
Thank you very much for your presentation today. This is not directed at anyone individually. You may all answer it. One of the situations I find now with technology moving so quickly, with the Elon Musk proposal of satellites saturating our outside of our atmosphere, how that will change this landscape of internet access and ability and speed. And it moves into, and this could be a little bit of crystal balling, because it then goes into access to smart cities technology, where all cities become smarter with technology. Will that enhance cybercrime or normal crime compared to diminishing crime because of the accessibility and speed? And I can see the smart city technology mostly reducing crime, because there's more activity out there observing and watching. So how do we see the future in this space gathering for the community and businesses, either accessing the Elon Musk systems or the NbN systems or whatever systems come out, plus with the smart city technology?
I'll start and just give a quick overview just about obviously there's a lot of competitive space in the connectivity networks and so forth, which is to be expected with the rollout of new technologies. I can't comment. My assumption would be that if you're connected, you're connected. And so cyber criminals are going to be able, like everyone, like we do in our businesses, like we do with our technologies, and like Nigel alluded to before, is they just continually evolve all of the time. And it doesn't really seem to matter what technology you're using or how you're connected, whether you're connected on your mobile phone or connected through fixed wireless or satellite. Where there's a will, there's a way, and they're always going to be able to penetrate, unfortunately. That's my understanding and my view. But Nick, you can probably comment a little bit further on that.
Yeah, absolutely no doubt that with the increased connectivity, cyber is going to be even more of a concern, even the last couple of years with the pandemic and the increase in online activity across the board globally has resulted in the spike in cybercrime. So there's absolutely no doubt that with everything going on in Elon Musk's wardrobe, that's going to escalate an already increasing issue of cybercrime. I've got absolutely no doubt.
Yeah, question for Nigel. So with Crime Stoppers, we had talking about things in retrospective, we had a situation where we're a removalist and logistics company based in Victor Harbour, and we had a gentleman who emailed us looking for some work, wanting to move house, was in the hospital for an operation on his throat, sounded all legit and was good, felt sorry for him, and booked a removalist for 4 weeks' time. As it got closer, he wanted to buy some furniture off some people who, because he was in hospital, would only take cash, but wouldn't take credit card, and he couldn't do it. So I said, could you facilitate the purchase of the furniture and then add it to our bill? I immediately got suspicious. And this guy very happily gave us credit cards, 6 in fact, 1 each week, that I kept knocking it back. But the story here is that having been involved with my wife being in an identity theft 6 months ago and the pain that caused, I went to, first of all, SA Police, and they said, no crime's been committed. We're not the people for you. So you kind of feel helpless. So I went to the banks to say, here's a credit card from, let's say, Mary Smith. Can you let her know these people have her credit card details? Didn't want to know about it because I wasn't Mary Smith, and therefore that information is confidential. So this is, again, an example where technology gets away from us and we try and prevent a crime, and in actual fact, no one wants to know.
It's a really interesting one. Like we mentioned about underreported crime. So police, we have a great partnership with police, but they just are very much compliant on if it's reported, we can actually investigate it, and we can go through due process. If it's not reported, then it's unreported. And we have lots of incidences with crime that's been perpetrated, and it'll be crime in Victor Harbour that's, from a retail to a service level business, but it's not reported to police, so police are not aware of the crime and they won't investigate. Your situation on financial and credit cards, yeah, I think there are some issues in the system of what are you meant to do as a small to medium retailer or business, okay, and you think there's some dodgy stuff happening. Who can you go to actually report it when no one really wants to help you out? I don't have the answer to that. Would love to help you out from a point of view. The thing is, with Crime Stoppers, you can report suspicious behaviour. Now, on reporting of that behaviour, and you can put in as much detail as you want, that will eventually end up with SAPOL, and it will end up in terms of SAPOL, probably if it's in this local service area back in Victor Harbour from a police point of view. And in essence, it's on their books, okay, because it's reported. So, yeah, it's probably not going to answer you or solve your issue, but I hope you felt better. What was the end outcome of?
Richard going back to the guy and saying, sorry, that card's been before, I'm in an actual fact that hadn't. And he would say, no, I've written another one. I've written, who has this script now?
Yeah.
And he just kept coming back and back and back. In the end, we just stopped answering them.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, look, there's some funny stories. I remember a story, and I'll tell you that one day at the Adelaide Football Club, someone's rung me, and it was some rich guy, and he wanted to go in the rooms, and I tried to vet his identity, and I couldn't. But he said he was enormously wealthy. He was this and this, and he's done this and this, and he has these businesses. In the end, I met with him, but in the end, he was a shonk. All right, so it's a bit like some people just have a land, and for whatever reason, they're just weird. It's just weird. But it was a funny experience, me going through that anyway.
Good morning, all. Thanks a lot for your presentations this morning. One thing I guess that I took out of it was I probably need a password manager. A bit like yourself, I reckon I've got an easy 100 on mine. But this is where I'll probably get a rap over the knuckles. The majority of them seem to be saved on some kind of autofill on my Google. Is that going to do me in?
Yeah, so turn that off is the short answer. So anything to do with Google and remembering passwords, when you install a password manager on any of your devices, you should be able to turn that function off for Google. I know I did that with mine. In terms of password managers, I use one called Bitwarden, it's called. But if you Google free password managers, and you can purchase password managers, not for a huge price, but there's some really good free ones available. But when I installed that, it gave me the option of removing any other password remembering devices or functions on my device, and you definitely do that because. That's not to say that Google is shonky, but you've got a password manager to do all of that for you. So turn that function off within Google, and if you should be able to do that relatively easily. I'd definitely recommend doing that.
The other thing to do is once you put all your this is what I do, is you print out all your passwords, all right, and then you have that file, okay. And I've got a safe, so I'll put that in the safe with my other bits and pieces. So if I die, all right, my family members can actually have access to all the stuff, okay? Otherwise, they won't have access. What's that?
Yeah, actually, sorry, and elaborating on that point. So 10, 15 years ago, it was a big no-no to write usernames and passwords on a bit of paper and leave it in the top drawer of your house, okay? Because someone could break into your house and then they've got all your usernames and passwords. It's now actually gone switch. It's actually more safer that you do that than do it on a document and save it on your computer. So what Nigel's saying is, I mean, I do sort of something similar. I actually, my password manager, the master password, I've written that down on a piece of paper and I've given that to my parents at their house. So on the off chance that I forget that master password, I can give my dad a call or I can go around and see that that's where it is. And I've done the reverse. I've done the reverse for them. But actually writing them down on a piece of paper and putting them somewhere safe in your house is actually probably not a bad idea. Barring someone breaking into your house and getting those details, it's actually probably quite a good practice, I would say. There won't be any official government advice on doing that, but personally, I think that's a good way to go.
Can we just try and keep a couple more questions, and then I think we can network afterwards with the three. So how many questions are there to go? 4? Okay. Yeah. Okay, it's good we got the questions, so.
Just being one of the people here that is in the upper age group, you get lost. I understand what you've been saying, but to be able to do it and implement it is another thing, unless you've got some younger people who can do it for you. What I would like to see perhaps in this region, and I deal with a lot of older people as a volunteer manager of a charity, whether through the council, through the library, through some other method, that there could be some classes run for the older age group on how to manage and learn about cyber stuff. Some people don't even answer their mobile phones. I'll give you an example. They give us their phone number so we can call them about delivering the couch they've just bought, but they won't answer the phone. And we have to go around and actually knock on their door. I don't answer any phone number I don't recognise. Right? So you can't get in contact with them, even though that's not to do with cyber. But that upper age group probably needs some encouragement on how they can protect themselves and how good or bad in one way or another that technology can help them. and I would like to see the median age group down here, I believe, is about 59 in the Victor Harbour Council area. So there's a lot of people beyond, a lot of people beyond working age that live here in all these villages and so on. I'm just wondering if some sort of education in this area of cyber security from a personal point of view, you know, on their phones, on their devices, at home, etc., they could be taught a few things on how to do it.
Yeah, look, I'll only say one thing. My mother, who's older, she's got Parkinson's. She really struggles with technology. In fact, doesn't have a computer. Her Parkinson's would have had to modify the phone, but it's an issue. Scam callers are a pest. She'll actually converse all right on because she's kind and she thinks that maybe the internet is playing up. So it is an issue, but these guys can talk about it.
Yeah, that's finished. There's one that goes on at the library.
Dawn, you raised a really good point, and I know that council has actually held some sessions before at the library in conjunction with SAPOL. I think the last one was in November, and for people that couldn't make that, they also had like a drop-in session afterwards, like for one-on-one. So we have a deputy mayor in the room, so certainly take on board that feedback and educate the community on the next session, because you did raise an important point.
Sitting Victor Harbour now, I spoke to the IT manager. Victor Harbour is currently now, I spoke to the IT manager yesterday, and they're putting in on a roster system an IT person into the library once a week to help the community, anything to do with computers, cyber, anything like that in information. So now they've got this in place. Hopefully that will benefit the community much better in the area of how to access computers and technology for the community.
Just as a general thing, I'd certainly get onto U3A with the older age group and ask them to start some presentations and things, and I'm sure that'd be something that would interest them very much.
Well, quickly on that, can I say, NbN, we actually have several community outreach programs. And one of them is focusing on cybersecurity at the moment, so we have a community ambassador. I'm not certain when the last time she was in the Victor Harbour region, but we do work with council and with the local libraries as well. And I think that's the important takeaway, is how is it being promoted and getting out to the right people so that they're aware that we're running these programs. So I'll definitely take that as a takeaway. Yeah. Yeah, that's great feedback.
Thank you. Rob Heaslip, South Coast Realty. Also been known to have the odd trophy or two of one of your past players, teammates in the front bar of the Grosvenor. I think you might know who it is now. Hacker Watch. I'm not too sure if there's a database that, I'll direct it at Nigel, but I think the other two could possibly make a comment. Is there a database? I know most of the hackers are international, but I'm sure there must be some in Australia also. Do you keep a database of hackers in Australia? Do you watch them? Or do the police watch them, keep an eye on them, like they do with other criminals? And just say hypothetically, if there was one in Victor Harbour, is there any way you could advise the businesses?
Unfortunately, that's above my pay grade, I believe, when it comes to a list. So I'm not sure at all. I imagine there would be some kind of list of known cyber criminals within Australia, if that's been established. But yeah, in terms of ever seeing that list or knowing about it, unfortunately, I don't have anything to share with you on that one. It's a great idea. I don't know how developed it would be, but I would like to think that there's something there so that we've at least got a bit of an idea. But like coming back to one of the first questions, it's such a tough crime to pin on anyone due to how easy they can mask themselves online and hide themselves online. So it is a really tough environment to work in. Sorry, I don't have an answer for you. I'd love to see it though, it'd be great. And yeah, I'd like to think that there's no one from Victor Harbour there, for sure.
There was a website that popped up before, and I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but it's called haveibeenpwned.com. So have I been owned, but with a P instead of the O. So what you can actually do is put in your work or your personal email address, and it will tell you whether your email address has been compromised as part of a hack of like a larger company. So for example, Latitude, Optus, it will tell you whether your data has been breached and what type of data has been breached. So that website again, just remember, have I been owned, but it's a P instead of a O.
It's on the slides as well, so when Colin's
which we'll send out.
Yeah, circulate them out. You'll see it on one of the slides. It is a really good resource. I ran out of time in my presentation to run through it with you, but not just email, but even mobile phone numbers, and it will show you the list of data breaches. Hopefully you get a green screen that says no data breaches and you can tap yourself on the back. But it'll explain which ones have been affected, and my advice would be any of those that you still have up and running, go and change the usernames and passwords on them pretty quickly, because those details are somewhere out there in the ether that could be used.
Yeah, thank you everybody for coming. Really appreciate it. Sam from Below Zero Air Conditioning. I had a lot of questions, but most of them have been answered. But I just had one, just more of a lighter one. What's the point of being hacked on Facebook? What's their main goal when someone does another profile of somebody else or yourself and then want you to be friends? Any clues?
So we were talking about this before, the posts on Facebook where you answer 25 questions about yourself. I don't know whether people have seen those. Where how many kids do you have? Where did you meet your wife or husband? Those types of things. Is that kind of what you're talking about, or
more you just get a friendship message, like as into you're already a friend with them and suddenly get a new one, and people say, and then if you do the mistake by forgetting you were a friend, then you'll get a message through Messenger saying, how are you going? And starts the conversation off that way. But I was trying to get the background of why they actually did it. What are they trying to glean out of it?
Yeah, I think it's the first step in trying to get important information out of you that may help them get into your systems of some sort. That's normally what it comes down to. Or the first step in trying to scam you out of something. So it might just be trying to understand you better. So that's a little bit more personal, where they're actually trying to take on someone's profile. Dawn, who's just left, and I were talking before about the "Hey Mum" messages that have been flying around from kids saying, I've dropped my phone in the toilet, or I've broken my phone and I need help, and which appeal to the emotions of a parent. You don't think, oh, is that my son or my daughter? You just think, oh no, they're in trouble, I need to help them straight away. I'll just call this number, or I'll just message this number, or I'll do whatever they like, do whatever they know, even though I don't know where it's coming from. They're the types of things that are out there at the moment that are just trying to get people to provide something, to provide some information or something that is important that will lead on to. So I don't know exactly where, but that to me is the first stage of that social engineering and trying to get information that will lead on to some form of scam or cyber attack of some sort.
Helen Sampson from Jagged Crow Creative. I'm a web designer, so my question is around how often, you talked a lot about emails getting hacked and links sent through Messenger and all that sort of stuff. How often, or what percentage, I guess is my question, of cybercrimes relate to websites being hacked?
Yeah, good question. I don't have a figure for you, but I know I know domain names and the slight changing of domain names has been a real issue. And that kind of ties in a little bit to the question we had about hovering before. If you hover over an email address and it shows you where you're going to go if you click on that. There's a lot. There have been a lot of I wouldn't call them initiatives. There have been a lot of methods that cyber criminals have tried where they will send you to an address. Let's use ANZ for example. It will be www.anz.1com.au or something like that. There's a slight change to the domain email address. Okay, and it will send you to a site that looks exactly the same as the ANZ one that you use, because it's been set up that way, but it's not the ANZ website. It's a slight change in the domain name. And then from that, they get all of your information because you see it as exactly what ANZ is. Okay, similar thing with email addresses, but websites and web domains in particular. And that's I guess that attention to detail in terms of if you need to access an ANZ website, don't do it based off of an email that you've received or contact that's been made to you. Access it through your method of doing that, okay? So if that means on your web browser, www.anz.com, you do that yourself, as opposed to, I'll do it based off of a message that I've been sent or an email that I've been sent saying, go to this web address, because that's where the risk possibly is. I don't think the number of threats via web domains and that type of thing has increased. I think it's stayed relatively static, but that's because other methods like email and text have just gone up dramatically. So the cyber criminals have gone, well, I'm just going to concentrate on emails and texts, because changing web domains and all that is actually a bit of work for them, and they have to try and replicate a web page to to replicate another one. There's as you know, a website, it's not the easiest thing to do. So yeah. Thank you.
I was asking more in terms of people actually hacking into websites that they don't own and creating trouble and strife.
Oh.
So that's more my question, is actually people getting their websites are taken over or having malware loaded on their website and that sort of stuff. I suspect it doesn't get reported a lot, because I've only ever seen it happen twice in 10 years, but I've never reported it, and I suspect there's a whole lot of education that needs to go around that for people in my industry to report it.
Yeah, let's have a chat once we finish, if you like. I'm interested in that, and I can get back to you with hopefully some info. Yeah.
Yes, I'm not quite sure whether I'm making an observation or asking a question, probably both. But what I take from all this is that given the ubiquity and sophistication of cybercrime and adding in Moore's law, how can we possibly keep up with it? It's a lost cause, isn't it?
Yeah, I know it's hard. I know we sort of paint a pretty grim picture, and I know a lot of small medium businesses say, well, look, if Optus and Medibank can get hit with all of their money and all of their time and all of their resources that they put into cyber security, then what hope do we have? Okay, and we do hear that question a fair bit. There's a couple of things to that. The first thing is that their cyber security maturity for both Optus and Medibank was nowhere near where it needed to be, and they were quite simple cyber attacks that hit both Optus and Medibank. So they weren't what I would class as 100% secure the way they should be. That's the first point. The second point is it's really just all we can recommend is that you try and make yourselves more secure and resilient and make yourselves less of a target. That's the key thing. And if that means using one thing we talked about today, passphrases, if you redo all of your passwords and do passphrases, then you're going to be stronger straight away. If you can use multi-factor authentication on a few key systems, then you're going to be even stronger. It's really about, yes, it's a very strong likelihood of it happening, but I can still do things to try and limit that and make my protect myself, not just individually but as a business as well.
One question is, this is more a statement, and probably for Nick, why wouldn't the government implement a regime in Latitude? They had data back to 2005. Why are they keeping data for so long on people that may not even be customers anymore? And should that be brought into law, that companies have to eliminate data after a certain length of time?
I'm being grilled by my own panel member. I thought there was a rule against that. No, that is going to change. I'd be very, very surprised in the not too distant future if that whole question around data retention and the length of time businesses and organisations can hold your data. I imagine that is going to change quite drastically. I also think that the amount of data that organisations will ask you when you sign up for membership and those types of things is going to probably reduce as well, as businesses and organisations realise, do we actually need the amount of data we're asking from Nick and from Nigel and from Rachel? Do we actually need that amount of data? Because if we, they're taking on that risk by bringing all your data on board. Okay, so I think there's going to be that shift as well with organisations asking for data as well as the length of time. I mean, there were Optus customers that weren't even Optus customers at the time, but they were previous that had data compromised. So I imagine that's going to change.
And the reason... Are we finishing up?
Look, there's one more question, but I actually want to raise a question which has come from the floor. The focus of today's seminar focused on cybersecurity and the individual business level. My question is, to what extent is cybersecurity in small regional cities a community issue? And to what extent can local governments, in partnership with local chambers of commerce, which is us, enable and facilitate cybersecurity in regional areas? By way of an example, the City of Victor Harbor Council is presently implementing a $6 million 5-year corporate systems upgrade. One of the main features of this upgrade is that council will shift from keeping servers on site to implementing a software as a service to improve cybersecurity. In addition, the council owns its own fibre optic network, which passes through some of the most important business districts. In your experience, have you seen councils who are able to contribute to cybersecurity in the local economy, and what are the most promising features of their offerings?
I think the most important aspect to take away is that I don't think I've come across a council that doesn't have a really stringent cybersecurity plan in, especially when they do have their own infrastructure. We've got lots of councils that have an NbN infrastructure and lots of councils that don't, sometimes in the regional area, depending on whether they've co-invested with the government in order to put that infrastructure in as well. So that was a long question, but it's in writing here for me. Who are able to contribute something? I think the biggest voice that works well is to work really closely, and because we work with all of the chambers of commerce throughout regional South Australia and Northern Territory, and the most successful chambers work really closely with their councils. We have a lot of councils that don't have a great relationship with their chambers, or they don't support their chambers of commerce, and it's really important, obviously, that they do, because the business owners provide that voice, and vice versa, about what's going on in the communities as well. Yeah, I think that probably answers the question from my perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, just to elaborate on that to a great extent, I think local governments can facilitate endorsing these types of events and promoting these types of events and trying to get as many people to these types of events and promote this messaging, because it's in the best interests of all, and that's our whole message, is trying to uplift the security and resilience of all Australians and businesses. So that, and I do know we're ramping up our regional engagement, and councils and chambers of commerce are the two key avenues to doing that. That's how we want to, approach that, and so that we can come along and promote our message through their avenues, because they're the people out in the regions that know and hopefully can get everyone in the room. So to a great extent, I would say, for that one, absolutely.
Last question.
James Wheeler, Cobbler, just trying to build on a little bit on a couple of last floor questions, more about web infrastructure and website safety in general. I run a couple of very small websites for the business. They're probably only getting a couple of hundred hits a month. One of them has an e-commerce site, but daily I would have people try and compromise the admin passwords on it. A few times a year I'll have denial of service attacks launched on those websites. What's being done in the wider picture for business safety online? There must be feasible ways to try and stop some of these generic attacks.
Good question. I don't have an answer for you, but I'll get your details and I can hopefully get an answer for you or get at least some further information on that exact question. I'm the first to admit I'm not an expert on all things to do with websites and that type of technical area, but I'm more than happy to have a chat with you once we finish and get your details and come back to you with some where I can point you in the right direction or at least give you some information. Cheers.
Thank you, and thank you for those who stayed along. I know some people have had to leave for business, and we really appreciate your time. This is being recorded. We have asked the speakers if they're okay with that. So this will be edited and sent out to people who are in this room, and also the presentations, as we said. So look, I'd quickly like to wind it up. I'd first of all like to thank the Convention Centre here and through Stuart Riddell. Thank you very much for setting this up. It's been fantastic. I'd also like to thank Julie Irwin, who's organised the day, and thank you very much indeed. But more importantly, I want to thank the people who have actually, the businesses that have attended here today, to give your time and your commitment to this. Very much, it's a grey area, I see, with cybersecurity, and it's evolving as we speak. And we've got 3 guest speakers here, particularly NbN Co for co-hosting today as the silver sponsor. Thank you very much indeed, and your information is valuable to us, and working together with business chambers is very important, like we are. But also to Nick and Nigel, thank you very much for your presentations today, your information. In fact, it could almost be that we could have almost a day on these questions, and also take away from this as a business chamber some information and questions we need to ask and lobby to state and federal government. That's what I think we need to do. That's the big takeaway I get as the employers' chamber here today, is that there's a lot of unanswered questions, but there's been some great information, some great tips. There's also been some tips and traps about what you do. And what I would want to do with the 3 speakers today is provide them with a modem that I purchased overseas a couple of years ago. No, not really. But no, thank you very much for your input today. It's been tremendous. We're way overdue, way over time. And it's been worth it, though, because I think the questions have been fantastic. Before the speakers leave this stage, we'd like to give you a special little presentation. Julie, would you like to come up and do the honours? It includes an upgraded modem, yes. Yeah, so these are all local products and obviously from the region. So if we can put our hands together for the 3, please. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, it's much appreciated. Thank you.